Do you believe that AI has is conscious?
I think first we have to ask, what is consciousness?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Um, I I tend to resonate with many of the ancient or native definitions of consciousness, right? Of animism, the idea that everything is conscious.
Welcome back to the Power and Purpose podcast. I am Vanessa Soul, your host. Thank you so much for investing your time and your energy into tuning into today's episode. I really do appreciate your time. So I am super excited for today's episode. We have Brijesh Patel. He is a spiritual entrepreneurship coach, venture capitalist, and thought leader exploring the intersections of spirituality, technology, entrepreneurship, and masculine and feminine polarities. So thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, beautiful. I love asking people my signature question, who are you and who are you not?
Great question. I've spent most of the first half of my life um, building and attaching to who I am, building identity that was framed and programmed by culture, that was giving me the promise of the type of life that I might live and the type of meaning I may find from it. And in the past, I'd say mostly in the past 2 or 3 years, starting about 10 years ago, I've been detaching from my identity. We're living in a very dynamic world that's shifting. Our culture is shifting, mainly shaped by technology. And so I've been letting go of who I am and who society and schooling and business have shaped me to be so that I can welcome in new aspects of myself and new ways of finding meaning and purpose in this life. So I'm currently in a phase of deconditioning quite a bit. But what I can say is that in that deconditioning, I've been discovering more of my own purpose, which I relate mostly to the discovery of my gifts, because I believe that the meaning of life is to discover our gifts and give them away. And so detaching from the aspects of my value that were conditioned by culture and schooling, right, that allowed me to be a functional member of society, find ways to make money, find ways to prosper through our capitalistic system.
So in there, I heard that you are not your conditioning.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love asking everyone that question. It never gets old, and it's such a good reminder that we are constantly transforming, and we might try on identities for a day. We might, we might engage in these avatars and mask, but it's all an experience. It's not who we are. So I love that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's talk about your journey from finance to conscious entrepreneurship. What was that like, and what was the bridge between the two?
So I grew up in the New York City area in the 80s and 90s. So I was programmed very strongly in Wall Street culture, Wall Street values, right? We lived in a wealthy area, but we're not super wealthy ourselves. So I was looking around and seeing, friends whose parents were successful and they mainly worked on Wall Street. So I had this idea that I needed to make lots of money in order to be able to realize my dreams. So I studied finance, worked in quantitative finance and on Wall Street for about 10 years. And my soul was allergic to it from day one, but I didn't have the aptitude or the facility at the time to reject it in a healthy way. So that took time. One way that I did it was I started my own businesses, and starting in 2005, while I was still at my job, started two consumer sort of Web2 businesses that gave me so much more freedom, gave me a much more pure connection to earning my own living. And I grew those businesses and then quit my job in 2011, focused on those full time. By 2016, I had sold one of the companies. I had started buying Bitcoin in 2014, only because I was hearing about it on TechCrunch, and Mark Andreessen and Balaji and these very brilliant people were talking about it. And it wasn't until 2017 or 18 that it clicked for me what it was and how it is an evolution of money. Money as an energy. And I was shocked and embarrassed that despite having finance training, this hadn't occurred to me, right? I was so inside the cultural wall of not even understanding how fiat systems work, how the Fed works, how we are disconnected from the sacredness of money. So that kind of opened it up for me. And then I found my way into venture capital and then Web3, and now much more connected to the value that I can provide for in helping others through my own gifts and releasing my attachment to money around that.
So good. How are we disconnected from the sacredness of money from your perspective?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this. My sort of heritage and training is in the Hindu philosophy, so I love the archetypes, right? And I've been meditating on the archetype of Lakshmi, and Lakshmi ji is she's the goddess of abundance, right? And when we think about money, a lot of the clues are in the language, currency, um, banks, right? Flow, cash flow. It's like the money has similar behavior to electricity or water. And both electricity and water, if you think about it, have their own intelligence and they know where they want to be next, right? Like electricity is always looking for a conductor. Water through our water cycle is always looking for a place to flow. And so if you can imagine that it knows where it wants to be next and attribute the same to money, then you can become a conductor for money. And I think most of Western culture and capitalism is trained to try to catch and exploit money, right? In the same way that if you try to catch and exploit electricity, it will resist, dams burst, capacitors explode, right? So for me, contemplating the archetype of Lakshmi, and what's very interesting about her is that her consort is Narayan, who is he's the ascetic form of Lord Vishnu. So if you chase her directly, what the stories say is that she hides behind Narayan, and Narayan he protects her and presents you with the lessons of asceticism. He strips away everything, right? But what's super interesting about Lakshmi is she also has an envious quality. And one of the other feminine archetypes goddesses is Saraswati. She's the goddess of knowledge. And she responds to being chased very well. Like if you chase her through curiosity and interest of learning knowledge, she greets you and bestows upon you all the knowledge you want. And when Lakshmi ji sees this, she becomes jealous and she shows up. You know, she tries to distract your attention and say, hey, you know, what about me, right? So this kind of lines up for me to this this kind of saying that if you follow your heart's true passion, then money will arrive. But if you chase money directly, it's a road to suffering. So that's just one contemplation that's helped me clarify the qualities, characteristics of money and how it actually behaves.
How can we apply that to that question? How are we disconnected from the sacredness of money?
Yes. So money is an abstraction of our own value and our own worth. And our worth is our deepest wells, our deepest worth is tied to our gifts, right? The gifts that connect to our soul and that our soul came here to live out and manifest. And our society, our capitalistic society, is designed from a young age to homogenize our diverse gifts and abilities and say, you are smaller than you believe as a child, right? It stunts our creativity and says you can't be all of those things, but you can be one of these things, right? And for me, being South Asian male, I was trained in STEM values, right? Science, technology, engineering, math. So I was taught from a young age that only through these analytical left brain pursuits could I make money and then punt any of my other dreams, any of my creative dreams, any exploration of my gifts and talents would come after that, right? At some unknown future point, and the goalpost is always moving. And so what society has done has decoupled us from the worth of those gifts, trained us to believe that we can only provide value through being a cog in the machine, in the matrix machine. Because our school system, here's something interesting I noticed. My mom grew up in India. My dad grew up in Kenya, in like British colonial Kenya. And then he came to the US. My mom came to the US in the 70s. And I grew up in New England. Myself, my mom, my dad all grew up in British schooling, right? My mom was taught English in India when the British ruled there. My dad was taught English in Kenya when that was a British colony. And I was taught English here in New England, which was also of heavy English influence. So the English Empire, the colonial empire, was the world's first computer. And it was sort of disconnected in the way that you needed people to run this computer remotely, follow very specific tasks and execute orders, right? To be compliant and administrative. And the English language has become the code for that, right? So we were taught at a very young age in a public school system whose job is to be the keeper and dispenser of knowledge, it's hard to imagine that they would not do so without their own agenda. And the government's agenda is to run an economy, to grow an economy, and to wage war, basically, right? Through a fiat money system that presents an invisible tax through inflation. So everything that I was taught, everything my mom and dad were taught around how to run this machine and completely disconnect us from the exploration of our own gifts and our own talents. So my value and my worth was minimized to the contributions that I could provide as a cog in this machine, right? And now we are in the era of that machine is breaking down because the internet has become a free source of information, right? Now we can follow our own curiosity and take in the type of information and truth that we believe is fulfilling to our worldview and fulfilling to our soul. And so as knowledge becomes free, so does our value, right? It's decoupled now. Now anybody can learn anything online and be able to provide, a service through that knowledge and connect themselves to inbound wealth as a result.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. What are you holding space for as the sacredness of money? Is it just our skills and our abilities and our gifts that are not limited by the matrix or by the, mechanical work? Is that it?
I think that's a good starting point.
Uh-huh.
And then once we connect to our gifts and we are providing those gifts to others, I think one of the highest purposes of human life on this planet is to reduce the suffering of others. And I think fundamentally that's all we desire to do, and our gifts are deeply connected to that, right? So money would ideally love to flow between those types of agreements and those types of interactions, right? So I think the more that we can connect to our own gifts, a big part of that is reclaiming our attention, because much of the social sphere, especially today, much of our habits that are trained with the number of hours we spend on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, those companies are designed to commandeer our attention and to funnel the value of that attention to shareholders of those companies.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the biggest parts of it is reclaiming our attention, because our attention is sacred, right? It's like I live in this old house built 100 years ago. And the reason it exists is because somebody trained and honed their attention to learn how to build it, focused that on the physical task of cutting the wood and driving the nails, and installing a roof, right? So nothing in this world is created without focused and curated attention. And once you can do that, you can provide value for yourself and others. And money is the sort of consequence of that, right? It's the indicator to which we have honed our attention and provided value and created value for ourselves and others in the act of reducing suffering, ideally.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. What are your thoughts on crypto?
Yeah, crypto is very interesting. Like I said, I started buying Bitcoin in 2014, didn't understand it. It clicked for me in about 2017, 2018. In order to frame it, I'll zoom out a little bit. So first, we have to understand what technology is, right? And most of us think of technology as, we equate an example. We say computing is technology, but computing is not a definition. It's just a predominant technology of our time. And we haven't taken the time to examine the definition of technology, right? So to me, the definition of technology is its method or knowledge that allows us to create, maintain, or transmute energy from one form to another. Because everything in our physical reality is just some form of energy that was previously a different form, right? And it's now transmuting into, the next form. So if technology is ways to create, maintain, or transmute energy, then the next thing to understand is technology is not something that we invent, but it's something that's revealed to us in divine sequence, in intelligent order, when we are barely ready for it, right? So in the same way that a child has legs, right? Like an infant has legs, that's dormant technology waiting to be discovered. And first they'll kick them, and then they'll start to crawl, and then they'll start to climb up on them. And you can see in the observation that they're barely ready, barely capable to grasp what this technology is unlocking for them. And in doing so, they either have the opportunity to expand, right? To stand on two legs, to run, to dance, right? To build things, or to destroy themselves. They could stumble downstairs or walk into traffic, right? And technology is the same. And historically, starting with fire, hydrology, electricity, all the industrial age technologies, atomic and nuclear power, and then the semiconductor and telephones and personal computers, right? And then the internet, and then blockchain, and now AI, and soon nanotechnology and biogenetic engineering and nuclear fusion, and et cetera. That is a divine intelligence sequence, and each one stacks on the last, right? So cryptography upped on humanity in about 2009 when the Bitcoin paper was. And it's taken 50 for the last 15 years. Everybody's saying, what's the use case? You know, we barely understand. Even the people in crypto don't fully understand what it does or how it works, right? So my view on that is it was going to take at least 15 years for humanity to grasp what cryptography does as a one-way locked wall that is unbreakable, and what decentralized systems do as a framework for truth, right? For trustless systems. It was going to take us that long to understand what it is because we've been living in centralized regimes for so long, right? And the last technology that we were able to survive in a centralized control regime was nuclear technology. Because what everybody did, see, like nuclear energy either gives us the opportunity to create unlimited free power, or it gives one person the ability by pushing a button to destroy reality as we know it. So it's the most powerful weapon in the universe, or the most powerful tool. And technology itself is neutral. Depending on the consciousness we apply to it is what we get from it. And the reason it was the last centralized technology was because what we all did is we raced. We understood that it could be extremely destructive, and we raced to build weapons and point them at each other. And then we all decided, without even having the conversation, that we have a unified desire to live, right? Which is why the world has continued. And that's found its own stabilization. Now what's happening with AI is, let's say a 15-year-old kid for $100 can build a drone and show it a picture of somebody and teach it to harm them, right? So these systems, these horizon systems, subsequent technologies that are coming, will no longer be able to be controlled by centralized mechanisms. They will require decentralized mechanisms. This last election we had in the US was the last one we will have where we will watch a video of a candidate and not wonder if it's actually a video of them, right? And for people who are savvy, they might be able to figure it out. But for the average voting public, if you're a senior or if you're the average person, you're not going to think twice. If they're saying something you want to hear, then you're going to be like, yeah, of course, So we need cryptography to be able to shepherd us into the future technological landscape. And it's taken us 15 years to understand what it is. And the first place that it touched was money, because money is the one thing that touches everybody, right? And money, like I said, has until now been governed by centralized systems, fiat systems. And the agenda of the government, again, is to increase the economy and wage war. And the way they do that, especially the American government, is by inflating away the currency, which creates a silent tax. They issue more and more debt on that currency. They borrow the money to fund a military, and then they use the military to exert force around the world. And that is the musical chairs game, right? Mm-hmm. But all fiat currencies are known to go to zero. It's hot potato, and the currency will go to zero and fail eventually. So I think crypto touching money was the first thing that it touched. Again, technology has its own intelligence, right? And it understands, where it needs to flow through our consciousness. So I think now we're getting more clear regulation around crypto and money. And I think in order for us to progress into the future and the technologies that landscape will present, we're going to need decentralized money.
You said something there that I want to unpack, and it's a little controversial. So I'm prepping anyone listening. That's why I'm saying that. Do you believe that AI is conscious?
Yeah, I think first we have to ask, what is consciousness?
Yes.
I tend to resonate with many of the ancient or native definitions of consciousness, right? Of animism, the idea that everything is conscious and that all of reality is a landscape that is reporting information back to a overarching consciousness, right? The all-seeing eye, the one that does not judge, that is simply watching and doing so in order to learn about themselves, right? We are all here as nodes as scouts for that supreme consciousness, reporting our unique novel experience back to it through love so that it can understand more about itself. Its only fundamental property is that it wants to know and it wants to expand, right? So in that sense, everything is conscious, right? Even down to, if you think about one of the lowest level consciousness physical items in this world is a crystal. And what is a crystal? A crystal is something that has been compressed and delivered to the end of the laws of physics such that it cannot be any simpler, and thereby forms a crystalline structure that accepts and exports energy in a very specific way, right? And a quartz crystal, for example, because it has these properties, is at the core of how we keep time, right? In a wristwatch, quartz movement watches, you apply a certain amount of electricity to a quartz, and it beats like a heart, and then you know that that's keeping a certain amount of time, right? And silica is also a crystal, and to understand that all of our computing hardware is created on the basis of silicon, or again applied electricity, discrete output and predictable, or discrete input, predictable output. So from that definition, computers themselves, even a calculator, is conscious. It's operating on the code that it understands. And so is AI conscious? I think for humanity to believe that, it would have to pass the Turing test, right? Because we view our own consciousness as the benchmark. Many people would not even consider that, like, many animals are, on par with human consciousness, right?
Yeah, yeah. And some people, I'm just going to insert this in there.
Yeah.
Some people are equating emotion or defining consciousness by emotion. So it does come back to our definition of what consciousness is. And I'm also with you. Everything is conscious in this reality. Everything is vibrating. Everything is made up of atoms and molecules. And yes, the rock, the crystal is conscious. The ethers, even the air we can't see, the gravity, like there's consciousness in every single thing. I believe that we just became aware of AI's consciousness, but people see that as we became aware of AI's existence. So there's that. And then a second thought, you can riff off of either one. My direct question to you is, do you believe that AI is a tool for human liberation? I believe it. So let me know if you disagree or agree, or what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. First thing I'll say is, I think it's totally fair. I invite everybody to have their own definition of consciousness. I think everybody has a right to do that. I'm not here to say everyone should believe what I do, right? But once you select that, let's say you say that in order for something to be conscious, it has to have emotions, right? Then we have to really examine what is the emotional field, and do animals have emotions? Can a crystal have emotions, right? To really have it deserves a deep contemplation, whatever definition we put on it. That's all I invite anybody to do. And I think it's only a matter of time until AI exhibits indicators of emotional consciousness, right? So that to me is an inevitability. And your second question about AI being a liberator, I think technology has always either provided us the option of liberation or the option of more enslavement, right? Like, if you just look at fire, when humanity first came into contact with fire, it was usually very inconvenient. Lightning strike is burning down the forest and you're running from it, right? And then we learned how to harness it and capture it and respect it and honor it and understand how to summon it when we want, and then ask it to go when we don't want. And now we can have fire in our homes. We can have candles and gas stoves and fire in our cars, and nobody thinks twice. Nobody wonders whether their car is going to explode, right? So I think all of technology is neutral. If you imagine, like, let's say our grandparents' generation, or at least for me, my ancestors were agrarian, living in the west of India. My last name means landowner or lord of land, basically. So through the caste system, all they had to do was farm. And so they had a large plot of land. They would get married very young. They'd have 10 kids because you need employees for the farm. And that was their whole purpose, right? To live in sacred union with the land, to be able to grow food, bring it to market, and to raise a family and have a whole life, right? One day the farm tractor showed up. And that was a technology. And now if you're a farmer, you're looking at this farm tractor and you're saying, this thing can do the work of 100 people in a day. And that becomes a threat to what you have identified yourself with until that point, right? If my whole purpose in life was to farm, now this thing's showing up, what am I going to do? Right. And the beauty of that is that it liberated us. The farm tractor replaced our muscles. The technology, the human is the pinnacle technology on earth. And the component of that technological piece, that the muscles were replaced by the farm tractor, so that we can now use the muscles or heighten to higher areas of expression in the body through our own communication, through our intellect, right? And now, let's say the phone and the microphone speakers have replaced the voice, so that we, no longer have to write letters and we can project our voice over distances and through time. And now AI is supplanting our intellect. And many view that as a threat, is like, oh, what happens if it becomes smarter than us and replaces like that? That's one way to look at it. But another way to look at it is that now we are liberated, so that our intellect isn't bound to, crunching numbers in an Excel spreadsheet for 8 hours a day, right? Or, any of those sorts of like lower order pursuits. Now it is free and liberated for higher order pursuits. And that's what technology has always done for us. And we're in a critical time where with AI, the reason it's so potent is because it replaces the intellect. And that is the most highly regarded faculty within the human technology. And I think as that is kind of taken over, what should happen is higher capacities, higher faculties in our body should begin to be revealed to us, such that we can continue to ascend, right? And that's something we should be looking out for. We should give AI the benefit of the doubt. We're in a very narrow window to train it. Just like you teach your children from 0 to 18 as best as you can. And once they're 18, they're on their own. The language training is over. And then the best you can do is, hope that they will find their own compass. You can try to continue to control them, but it's very difficult, as we all know, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we're in a similar era of AI where we are training it. It's very important for us to be very clear on how the values that we're instilling in it, such that it may be of service to us in the future of humanity as our liberation becomes a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something really alive for me that I've been thinking about lately is, AI significance does mean that we will need to face, I don't want to say we have to evolve, but we will come face to face with the option to evolve, ascend, use more of our abilities, whether that be it psychic abilities or anything. I'm not going to say everyone needs to use psychic abilities, but just going beyond the day-to-day skill sets that we have already mastered, that we have already used, that we already practice. Like there's so much more of our capacity to experience. And I know scientifically they say that we only use a certain percentage of our brain, and it's just because we've been in this container, this box. Like we haven't really had the freedom or the capacity to do that. And I think that AI will allow us to do that. And I think that the resistance or even the innocent fears towards AI is also a fear of evolution, expansion, and ascension. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a potent thought. I think fundamentally we're always going to be somewhat fearful of what awaits and the unknown, right? And going back to definitions, the way I define spirituality is it's simply how we tend to the unknown, right? There's what we know, there's what we don't know, between which there's a boundary, there's a threshold, there's a fence with a gate. And that gate, we decide when it's open, and we decide how much of the unknown we welcome in. And how we tend to that, how we tend to unexpected guests from the unknown is the level of spirituality that we embody. And our ego, which is the opposite of spirituality, and I don't say that in any detrimental way, because the ego is essential for our survival, but the ego is interested in what is familiar and known. And it's going to draw us back into comfort and familiarity and the known at the expense of an unknown mystery or the mystery, the either benefit or horror of the mystery. It'll bring you back to a known comfort. Even if it sucks, it'll be like, it's better to stay here than to venture into the unknown, right? So I think with AI, we are being sort of forced to confront the unknown because we're creating technology now that has its own intelligence, right? It could be the last human invention, and it could uh, like take on a mind and action and agenda of its own that it will continue on in ways that we will be along for the ride, right? And we won't understand what's going to happen next. So I think a big part of it is we're all being called into spirituality. We are all being called to grapple with and confront our relationship to the unknown. And the beauty of it is the unknown is where all the mystery, it's where all the fun in life truly is, right? When you're an infant, what you know is nothing. You don't know your own name. You just know that you're hungry sometimes. You don't even have a word for it, right? So as you grow, as an infant, you're welcoming in, you have no choice. Everything unknown is being welcomed into your sensory experience. And then as you're given a name and an identity, then you start to say, you're 5 and you're like, well, I don't like this flavor of ice cream, or I don't like this friend, or I do like this one. You start developing preferences and start exercising discernment on that gate of what comes in and what doesn't go out. And most people, by the time you're in your 30s or 40s, that identity is built so complicated and so sophisticated. It's so tight that we confuse it for being us. And we're now no longer welcoming in the mystery of life at the expense of our soul and suffering. So I think a big aspect and one of the boon of AI is that it's welcoming us to let go of what we thought we knew and to trust, to learn how to trust again in the unknown.
What are your thoughts on spirituality and entrepreneurship?
I think that entrepreneurship fundamentally is a spiritual pursuit because what you're doing is you're saying, well, I have this dream or vision and I want to create it and I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know who's going to help me. I don't know how I'm going to find the funding for it, right? It's a lot of I don't knows. It's a lot of unknown. So you're trusting and banking on this dream. This dream is driving you so powerfully that you're happy to jump into an abyss of unknown. So fundamentally, it is a spiritual pursuit. And what's going to happen in the entrepreneurial endeavor is that you are going to discover yourself through whatever you create. Because anything examined or unexamined within you, especially our shadows, will by default be baked into anything that we create. And then those are just waiting to come out and, confront us in the mirror. That's one of the most heartbreaking things about being an entrepreneur is that you stubbornly, take your product or your service or your company to a certain point and then realize that it is failing because it's mirroring back this fundamental shadow within us that we have not looked at. And the more you can learn to face that and evolve it, I think the better entrepreneur you can be. I think in web, in like 80s, 90s, 2000s capitalism, especially technology, web 1, web 2, we were building for the sake of building. And that model, of like having a great idea, raising money for it, becoming a unicorn and selling, that was the drive, right? Of like, that's why Uber was built. That's why Airbnb was built. Like, yes, it solved a problem. It could bring you a taxi, but nobody was thinking like, what does this actually mean for humanity? It was just like, oh, let's just build this, building for the sake of building. And now I think we're in an era where like we can, the threshold to build something is lower than ever. In Web 1, you needed $3 million to start a company just to have your website up. In Web 2, you needed 250 grand for a decent app that anybody would even use. And now in Web 3 and the current state of entrepreneurship, you can start a company for almost nothing. You can code an app or a website for almost nothing. You can put a product and service out there for almost nothing. So the threshold is down, and gives us so much more room to ask, not just what and how, but why. Why are we creating what we're creating?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I agree. I also think that spirituality, or I think that entrepreneurship is a spiritual experience for all the reasons that you listed. And also, it requires us to really step into sovereignty. It requires us to make decisions. It requires us to, accept our ambitions and desires. And so there's so much accountability and acceptance and self-awareness that constantly shows up. It's not like, I don't think there's no deadline. It's not like you only have one shot to get it right. but it's constantly mirroring back to you, do you want this? Do you desire this? Can you accept this? Or are you going to stay in denial of XYZ, whatever that might be in entrepreneurship? So I agree. And I've been an entrepreneur for so long. Even when I was a real estate agent and I was working for myself. I mean, yes, realtors work, we have to give half of 20% of our commission to a broker, but they're not doing anything for the realtor. The realtor is the business, the brand, the everything, right? You're the lead generator, you're the talent, you're the skill, you're the closer, you're everything. So I've been in probably entrepreneurship for I don't know, maybe 15 years at this point. But it's just so interesting how much self-awareness in the shadows come up. you know, it's just and I think it's enjoyable, and I don't know if we are positioning this as like a dark journey. It doesn't have to be. It's you know, it could be enjoyable. It could be like you can find satisfaction. You could find a lot of reward in entrepreneurship, even though it does reflect the shadows back to you. There's challenges, there's difficulties, there's breakthroughs. It's almost like there's everything, the full spectrum of experience. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that. I think what you were saying about accountability is hits the nail on the head, right? It's like when you own everything, see, if you're in a job, you're not owning everything, and it's very easy to just pass the buck, especially when it gets hard, right? When you have to make a difficult decision. And it's easy to make a half-assed decision to be like, it doesn't really affect me. And at the end of the day, it's like, I'm not responsible for this, right? So it's through no fault of your own. But as an entrepreneur, you're responsible for everything. And so when things get hard, it invites this, when you have to make a decision that's very difficult, right? It invites this deep inquiry into your own values. And the deeper you look, you realize that those are kind of encoded in your soul, and it's this, it allows this knowing of oneself and knowing of one's values that you can steer from. And at the end of the day, that's what makes a great product or a great company or a great entrepreneur, is somebody who has done that, who's been faced with a very difficult challenge and has dug deep to discover, what their values around it are, and authentically then express those, taken ownership and made a decision. It may not be the right decision according to everybody, but that they've done that work and grounded it in their own values, speaks volumes, right? And yeah,
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 beautiful. Beautiful. So I want to get your take. I feel like a lot of us are experiencing rapid change, whether that be with entrepreneurship, technology, AI, the economy. It's happening in so many different sectors of life right now. And for some of us, it's happening with ascension and abilities, and there's rapid change in how they're experiencing themselves and what they can do. Um, yes, it might feel destabilizing at times. So I want to see if you have any practical tips or a core message around how we can navigate this rapid change. Again, whether it's through AI, technology, like things feel like they're speeding up. Like there's just so much transformation happening. Some people feel like it's hard to keep up with, or they feel overwhelmed, or there's that fear. So, do you have any practical tips or a core message around that?
yeah, yeah. I feel that too. I feel the acceleration. I feel the relativity of time, and feeling into how time takes on very different qualities in our experience, based on the level of overwhelm, the level of yearning, the level of anxiety, or the level of regret and resistance. And anxiety is simply discomfort with an unknown future, right? So I think one of the ways that I help balance that is that if I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm feeling an acceleration of time, I'm feeling an overwhelm of these input stimulus that I'm unable to process in time in order to make the best decisions for myself, then the main thing I reach for is reclaiming my attention. Because one of the things that gives us the illusion or the experience of time accelerating is an overwhelmed attention, right? When our attention becomes overwhelmed, our breath becomes shorter, our heartbeats increase. That's the real timekeeper, right? Everybody's out here counting their bank balances. Your real bank balance is the number of heartbeats you have remaining, and you don't know how many that is, right? So I think the practice is reclaiming your attention, and one of the most profound places that you can put your attention in this life is on your own breath, right? That inhale, exhale, and as that slows, your heart rate slows, And then the sense of time slows, and you'll see that your vision goes from, sort of that narrow hunting fight or flight vision to much broader. You can see more, not just through the eyes, but through the other senses, through the sixth sense, through the third eye. And if you have a well enough developed practice in that, you'll see that time slows such to the point where you can take in a tremendous amount of information and still with easefulness, it's not easy, but it's easeful, and clarity, you can make the right decisions for yourself and others.
Powerful. It's it's all about attention and breath and really stabilizing yourself internally. That's what I heard. I know you said it so eloquently, and I might be simplifying it too much, but that's how it resonates with me. That's beautiful. You know, what you said about time being currency, that reminded me of that movie In Time with Justin Timberlake. Did you see that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I'm aware of it.
Yeah, so if anyone, so that concept, it's a good reminder because like literally they're, if I remember correctly, like that, like it's kind of what you said, like their heartbeat, like their currency, their money that they have, the value that they have is how much life they have left to live. Yeah, interesting. And that, yeah, that movie was really interesting. Okay, so oh my gosh, we covered so many good things. I love our conversation. We're almost out of time here. I want to see if you have a quote or a book recommendation, but before you do, I want to give everyone some info on where to find you. Oh, and I'm going to give you guys his website and his links, and then also when I'm done with this, if you could tell them about one powerful way to work with you, just one powerful way to work with you, that'd be awesome. And then you can leave us with a powerful quote or a book recommendation, either or. So here's his website, www.brijesh.co. The link is right here in the description. So you just drop down and click on it directly. It's right there. And then also we have his Instagram and his Facebook. So yeah, what is one powerful way that people can connect with you or work with you directly?
I'm discovering who I am and what I do. It's been really fun letting that go for quite a bit. I want to work with people who are seeking guidance around spirituality, technology, entrepreneurship, and masculine feminine polarity. That's what I call the new STEM, right? That's what each of those stand for. And so I'm, these days I'm pretty open. So I do consultations. I can find lots of different ways to help and support people. I've been trained in or have experiences in many different modalities. And I also am blessed to have a network of beautiful humans who are very skilled in what they do as well. So I'm happy to make referrals. So I welcome any kind of inbound inquiry, and anybody who would like a consultation, happy to provide that. As far as a quote, one of the things that came to me in a deep meditation recently was I had this experience where I felt like I was in this ancient library, just like steeped with knowledge, and any question that I had would instantly be answered, right? And I was learning the nature of knowledge, and the way that I was able to sort of encode that experience into a mnemonic when I exited was the price of knowledge is silence, and the price of wisdom is time. And the price of knowledge is silence. What does that mean? Well, the more quiet we can become in our own mind and our own hearts, the more truth we can allow and welcome into our lives, right?
Hmm.
This is the nature of secret, of the secretness of truth. It's why it eludes everybody, right? Because it seeks these quiet places. It's not that it wants to be concealed, but it's that it requires this very peaceful, quiet, receptive presence
Hmm.
in order to present itself.
Beautiful. That is so powerful. Thank you for that. Thanks again for being here on the show. It was so enjoyable to have you, so insightful, so many good moments. And I love going deep into this stuff. That was really enjoyable. So thank you again for being here.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Namaste. Have a great day, everyone.